I know you've heard the old adage that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, like driving the LA freeways every morning at 8 o'clock and thinking you'll have no traffic, or eating your Tennessee donuts every day and thinking you're going to lose weight, putting your thumb in a vice and thinking it's not going to hurt. These are things that if you do them over and over again, you're going to get the same results. But that adage is not true in every situation. If someone said to you, I know if I keep going to these job interviews every day, I'm never going to get a job. Well, that's not the case. Or if I keep exercising every morning diligently, I'll never be any stronger. Or if I keep praying and praying, I know there'll never be an answer. To the contrary, the Bible's very clear about doing the same thing over and over again, even if you're not getting the response that you think you should have. That Jesus said as clearly as anyone could say it in Luke 18, you ought to always pray and never lose heart. You ought to always pray and never lose heart. You should never give up. You should persist in prayer. When to stop praying? Well, the answer to that is never. I mean, never. In the great disciples' prayer that Ken just so aptly took us through, so many components, so much material. At the end of that, at least as he recites that disciples' prayer in Luke 11, he gives us a reminder that just because you get this information that we just got in the last hour and put it to work, if it doesn't seem to be taking you anywhere, if it doesn't seem to have any response, if your prayers seem to be bouncing off the ceiling, don't give up. And I'd like to turn you to that expression of what Jesus follows up in the Lord's Prayer, as we call it. And he reminds us to never give up. And he gives us a story to drive this home. I want to tell you, it's not insanity for you to keep praying and to pray next month and next year, and sometimes praying for the same thing over and over and over and over again, and 10 years from now to still be praying about those things. That's not crazy. That's not insane. That's biblical. It's biblical. I want to take you to this passage, if you haven't turned there already, Luke chapter 11. As you can glance through the first 4 verses there, you certainly see that we're dealing with the Lord's Prayer. Jesus taught about the Lord's Prayer, as we call it, the disciples' prayer, the model prayer, many times, I'm sure. Just like I've taught on prayer many times in the last 3.5 years, Jesus did as well, repeating many times the things that are found there in Matthew 6. And this is one occasion, and he starts then, after talking about that prayer and the elements of prayer that we should be involved in. He says in verse number 5, then he, that is Christ, said to them, suppose one of you has a friend. This is Luke 11:5. And he goes to him at midnight. That's a real inopportune time to go to your friend, unless you're in college, I suppose. It's a bad time. Don't come to me at midnight. And says to him, friend, lend me 3 loaves, for a friend of mine has come to me from a journey, and I have nothing to set before him. Verse 7. And from the inside he answers. Here's what the friend says. Do not bother me. It's a response you'd probably get from me. Do not bother me. The door has been shut. My children and I are in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything. Jesus said, I tell you, even though he will not get up and give him anything because he's his friend, yet because of his persistence, that sounds like a pretty common word. In the Greek New Testament, of course, the New Testament written in Greek, this is the only time you see this word in the New Testament. That's why translations like the ESV translate it with weird English words. Impudence, they translate it. But because of his impudence, by his shameless persistence, right? Not because he's his friend, but because of his shameless persistence, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. You need 3 loaves? I got 30. Here, take them. Just get out of my doorway. I'm done with you. So I say to you. Now, this is a story. It's a parable, but it's not a parable of analogy. It's a parable of contrast. It's a parable of, listen, we're not talking to a God that's like this, a bothered, frustrated, irritated person that's going to say, well, just take this and get out of my hair. But he is saying that persistence, that shameless persistence. Because I tell you, there's some connection there. And then he says this, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. And I'm sure you've heard this preached before, have you not? I had the advantage of taking my biblical languages, at least the beginning of my biblical languages, the first year, 2 semesters at the university. So I studied in the classics department at the University of Arizona, and I got taught Greek by a non-Christian. And we, it was fun because he didn't care about what the rest of the evangelical world was saying about biblical Koine and Attic Greek. But I was being taught Greek in the 5 tenses of Greek verbs, and you've probably heard this in some form by your preachers when they get to this passage, because ask looks like such a simple reference. But one of the tenses in Greek, we have 3, right? Past, present, and future. This idea here in this particular passage is what's often called in grammar a continuative tense. It's called the present tense in some biblical grammars and Greek grammars, but the idea is this is a continual and ongoing thing that's being described here. I mean, it's not even fair to call it a present tense. It's an ongoing tense. And so you've heard preachers preach this, and probably in the notes of your Bible, depending on what kind of reference Bible you have, it'll say this, it'll clarify this. I think the NAS translators put this in the margin, did they not? Ask and keep on asking. That's the idea. That's the whole illustration here. Whole illustration is about the impudence, the persistence, the shameless persistence. Because after a while, you start knocking on your neighbor's door, and you keep knocking. I mean, people driving by are going to think you're crazy. Right? So you're going to be ashamed to keep on knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking, but that's what's said here. Ask and keep on asking. And you know what? It's going to be given to you. Seek and keep on seeking, and you'll find. Knock and just keep on knocking till your knuckles are sore, and it'll be open to you. For everyone who asks, right, and keeps on asking, receives. Whoever seeks like that, persistently, finds. Whoever knocks, who's that shameless, persistent, impotent knocker, well, it'll be open. Now that's a interesting parable of contrast. And I got to tell you, if you're taking notes, there's a few things I want to say this morning, and the first one's not going to be all that helpful, but it's important. It's not going to be helpful because I'm telling you to keep on praying. Do not give up. Persist in it. Shamelessly persist. Be impotent about your consistency in prayer. And now I'm about to tell you something, just based on this contrast, that we're not dealing with an unwilling, troubled, bothered, inconvenienced, reluctant neighbor. I want to emphasize this, that when Christ says to us, ask and you're going to receive, seek and you'll find, and knock and the door will be open to you, he's trying to contrast that if even a bothered, irritated, inconvenienced, troubled neighbor wiping sleep out of his eyes will respond, certainly God will respond. It's an argument from the fact that if that kind of person will give in to a request, right? We're not talking about a God who has to give in. You don't have to wear him down. It's not that he is some kind of bothered, troubled, inconvenienced person. No, the Bible keeps on saying he's kind, he's willing, he's inviting, he's generous, he's eager. So I'd like you to write this down if you're the note taker type, and it would be good that you would be that kind of listener to Scripture. I think Ken Ramey would tell us in his great book about expository listening that you ought to do that kind of thing. So why don't you jot this down, okay? You didn't bring your pen and you don't care about the notebook, put it in your phone. Here it comes. Ready? Number 1, you need to reconsider the willingness of God. Write that down. You need to reconsider in your heart and affirm in your mind, the God that I'm praying to is willing to answer. The willingness of God. Let me throw these verses at you. Ready? Jeremiah 33:3. Call to me and I will answer you. Call to me and I will answer you. Psalm 50:15. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you. How about this one? Isaiah 65:24. Isaiah 65:24. Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will receptively hear. I will hear. Psalm 145:18. Psalm 145:18. The Lord is near to all who call on him. You know who's not near? The guy rolling over in his bed going, "Okay, would you just stop knocking on the door?" He wants to get away from that guy. That's not how God is. It's like he's drawing near to the door. Now, you're knocking, but he's drawing near. He wants to answer. He is willing and gracious and kind. James 1:5. Now, this is about wisdom. You know this passage, right? Ask God. This is true not just about wisdom. Who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. Without reproach. With a mindset that doesn't say, why do you keep on asking for this? Right? Do you really, last time I gave this to you, you didn't do anything good with it. He's not that kind of God. Generous, willing, kind. You need to affirm that, the kindness, the willingness, the goodness, the graciousness, the receptivity of the person of God. Now, I referenced this briefly last night, but I'd like you to turn to Psalm 73 to show you how this works out in real life. Asaph wrote this psalm, Psalm 73, and he's prayed and God has not answered. And he's made to wait. He's made to have his prayers, seemingly from his perspective, bounce off the ceiling. You've got prayers like that in your life, am I right? You pray for things. You think, this is a good thing. And is it not a good thing? I got a neighbor that's come and I need to feed him, and it would be the gracious. I'm not asking for the yacht. I'm asking for something that's good. This man is saying, hey, you have bread. I need bread, and it's not just for me to get fat and watch TV tonight on my bed and eat bread. It's for me to serve a traveler in the ancient world, a tired, dusty, hungry traveler. I'm just trying. God, would you please answer my prayer? And so, not a selfish thing. And so we have Asaph here struggling with those unanswered prayers. Drop down to verse 12. This would be a great psalm just to study the whole thing, but let's just jump into the middle of this. He's been praying for relief. He's been praying for things in his own life that aren't working out. And he looks across the street at the wicked. They don't care. They don't bring their sacrifices to the tabernacle. They don't worship God. They don't have any adherence to biblical truth. And yet they're always at ease. I mean, I'm praying to be at ease, and I can't be. Right? They increase in riches. I can barely pay my rent. Verse 13, all in vain I've kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence. This doesn't really matter. All this stuff, my godliness, the saying no to sin, the saying yes to righteousness, the going to church when I don't feel like it, saying my prayers, keeping my kids from these other things that everyone else does, and I tell them no, it wouldn't please God. It's all for nothing because I pray and nothing's happening. All day long I've been stricken, verse 14, and rebuked every morning. Right? You ever feel like I'm praying and it's just like, no. Verse 15. If I had said, I will speak thus. This is going to be my mantra. This is what I'm going to say. This is my conclusion. I'm thinking rightly when I think this way. God's good to everyone else. I ask God for stuff and it doesn't happen, and so I'm just stricken and rebuked, and it's not worth being even a follower of the God of the Bible. I would have betrayed the generation of your children. There's a lot of people out there that follow you. There's a lot of people that are associated, submitted to you. There's a lot of people that are seeking you and praying to you, and I'm betraying them. I would be a walking contradiction. Why? We'll go back up to the beginning of this psalm, verse 1. Because here's how he starts. He starts by affirming something that I want you to affirm. The willingness, the goodness, the graciousness, the receptivity, the kindness of God. Truly, God is good to Israel. Now, he couldn't say that about himself because he's got unanswered prayers, right? It'd be great to say, truly, God has been good to me. That's the day your prayers are answered. You say that kind of thing. But he recognizes this. There is a pattern. The children of this generation, God is good to Israel. I've seen it. To those who are pure in heart, God has been responsive to his children. The problem is, not me. But as for me, he's already said, we've already read it in verse 13, he's washed his hands in innocence. He's asked and confessed his sins and received God's forgiveness, and he sought to do right, and his sanctification was moving in the right direction. And yet, I almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped. Why? Because I looked across the street. I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. And you've got to admit some of the things you've prayed for. Even if you just take God out of the equation, you think, well, maybe you're praying for a loved one to become a Christian, to be in your camp, right? And you got the non-Christian across the street, and everyone in their family is in the same theological camp, whatever that might be, right? Even if it's not Christian, right? In other words, they think the same political camp, the same ideological camp, the same philosophical camp, and they all have unity over there. And you're here trying to walk this walk of faith, and you say, well, I'm envious of that. Not to mention, they seem to have enough money in the bank. They're buying their toys in the driveway, and everything seems to be going well for them. I've been diagnosed with this illness, and they seem all healthy. What is going on? When I saw the prosperity of the wicked. When things don't make sense, when you've adopted a biblical mindset and things do not make sense, then you're missing a piece of information. All right, think that through. When you envy, as a Christian, the non-Christian world, when you look across the street and say, I'm praying, I'm walking this walk of the Christian life, and it's just not worth it. When you're thinking that way and it doesn't add up, you're missing a piece of information. And that's exactly what's going on here. The perspective that was needed, right, is down in verse 17. Right? There's a perspective. When there's no answer from God. Let's get the verse in front of it. When I thought how to understand this, it seemed a wearisome task. I can't figure this out. Here's the information he's going to get when he goes to the sanctuary of God. It was a head scratcher till I went to the sanctuary of God. And then I discerned, now this is a time statement, right? Their end. It may be hard for me now. It may not seem worth it to me now that I'm following Christ in our case. And I'm praying and I'm doing the right thing. I thought about where they're headed. Truly, you've set them in slippery places. I mean, they're standing now, but they're going to fall. And you make them fall to ruin. How they're destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors. And trust me, that is a terror to die on a deathbed as a non-Christian. Right? We're supposed to die well, and being in pastoral ministry, I get a lot of experience with people dying. And I'll tell you, real Christians, they die well. I mean, they understand where they're going. I'm called in often to the relatives of non-Christians, and they don't die well. I think it was Herbert Lockyer who wrote the book. He wrote all the this of the Bible, all the men of the Bible, the women of the Bible, all the miracles of the Bible, all the parables of the Bible. You know that set. I think he wrote one called The Last Words of Saints and Sinners. It's not a bad book, just filled with anecdotes about people that die that love Christ and those that don't. And the idea here is, listen, where they're headed, this is not good. They're swept away by terrors. Like a dream when one awakes, oh Lord, when you rouse yourself, when you finally do respond, when justice is served, when vindication comes, you despise them as phantoms. All Asaph is left with in the present time of unanswered prayer is the presence of God. He's bitter, admittedly so. Verse 21, when my soul was embittered, I was pricked in my heart, I was brutish and ignorant, I was like a beast before you. Nevertheless, I realize this. The God that I'm seeking that doesn't seem to be answering, the knocking that doesn't seem to open the doors, the seeking that doesn't ever result in finding. I realize this. I'm continually with you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. Now, this is a guy that's his prayers are not being answered. And afterwards, I know the end of my life. I know where I'm headed. I said this last night. You got nothing to be thankful for. You got to be thankful for this. That hell has been canceled, that heaven's been secured, that your sins right now are forgiven. You're fully qualified for the coming inheritance. This is not about this life. Liberal Christianity, by the way, always takes a slide when it starts to care a whole lot about this life, and it wants to obscure and obfuscate the next life. Right? That's just the pattern. And the Christian life is not about the here and now. It's about the then and there. It's about preparing people for the then and there. It's about an ark that's been built, and we're trying to get people out of this shipwrecked world, pardon the pun, and getting them into the ark and moving them on to the kingdom. That's what this is about. And he says, I recognize where I'm headed. Afterwards, you're going to receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven? This is my future home. I'm a citizen there. I'm an alien here on earth. And there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you. And that's the big picture that changes everything, even about my unanswered prayers. There's something big about God. There's something overarching about the glory of God that takes my prayers and starts to adjust them. Now, my flesh and my heart may fail. I may be praying to get through this cancer scare or this problem in my family. And everything can go wrong, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion for the next 5 years. No, forever. For behold, those who are far from you perish, and you put an end to everyone who is unfaithful to you. But for me, it is good to be near God. Wait a minute, you're not getting your prayers answered. People across the street have everything that you want. You're not getting any of that. Yes, but I've made the Lord God my refuge, and I will tell of all of your works. Guess what? A lot of those works aren't in the answers in your prayer journal, but you've been good to Israel. You've been good to a lot of people that are pure in heart. To know that we're dealing with a good God. It may not be very satisfying at the moment, but you're dealing with a person. I was in the airport yesterday. My layover was in Atlanta. I was hungry. I went to the vending machine. I was really hungry, which happens a lot, every day. But it was one of those ones where you put the money in and it has those springs that spin and the thing's supposed to fall out. I was so hungry. I mean, if that thing had not fallen out, me and the vending machine would have had a real problem. Now, it's happened before. It didn't happen yesterday, but what do you do when the vending machine does not provide you what you expect? Right? You look around to make sure no one's watching, and you go at it. I mean, I pounded them, I shake them. They're heavier than they look. But you do what you can. And as long as you're shaking it, might as well shake a few other things out of there. But you're mad. I've asked you, in this case yesterday, I haven't bought these for a long time, but those strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts. I saw those. That took me back to junior high. I said, I got to have those. Right? I'm on a calorie fast here on this plane flight from LA, and I need those Pop-Tarts. And thankfully the spring spun and it fell out. It was always good. But if I'm at a convenience store there in the airport, and I give my money and something doesn't happen, and the person, the clerk, has got the thing in their hand, in this case, my frosted Pop-Tarts, right? I have a little different response. There's a person I'm dealing with. It's not a vending machine. I'm not putting in a code. Right? You put in a code and it doesn't work. You go to some rich guy's house and he's got the gate out in front and he gives you the code and you hit the code and the gate doesn't open. I know how to respond to that. It doesn't help, but you beat on the keypad. But if there's a guy in the gate and you give the name and you say, I'm going to such and such a person's house, and they, well, I don't know. And now we dialogue. Hopefully we have respect and patience, and we realize we're dealing with a person. What you're not dealing with is you turn to your wife and say, incompetent, worker at the gate, doesn't know what he's talking about, why don't we get better help in this neighborhood, whatever. Well, you might say that kind of thing. But we're not dealing with some minimum wage worker when you pray. You're not dealing with a clerk at the airport. And we're certainly not dealing with a keypad or a vending machine, but some people think that. Some people teach prayer that way. Right? Say it this way. That's what Jesus was praying against. This vain repetition. Say this, pray this, God will respond. I just want you to remember you're praying to a person, and not just a person that if you knock loud enough, you'll bother him and he'll get out of bed and help you. The whole point of this illustration is even if that happens to a person who's asking and pleading to an irritable man and they finally get out of bed and said, take all the bread you want, you're dealing with a God who's on the other side of that door, who cares, who's gracious, who's kind, who said many, many times in Scripture, call to me, I'll answer you. So we have to deal with the fact that we have a good person. Suppose one of you has a friend, it says in verse 5, and you go to him at an inopportune time, and you ask for something. I'm just saying you're asking the best friend a person could ever have. I mean, Ken was talking about it, right? This is our Father, Abba. This is our Father that loves us, who loves us so much he demonstrated his love for us that he sent his Son to suffer and be beaten, spat upon, mocked, hung naked on a cross. Even the Renaissance paintings won't paint it accurately, right? He didn't have a nice little scarlet drape over his privates on the... this was a naked, humiliating, ignoble death. I don't know how much Christ loves you, and he's not giving you that thing that you're praying for. Just remember, God could not love you any more than he loves you. And he says, ask, seek, knock. Now, I told you the first point wasn't going to help much, but it's important. Doesn't help me for you to say, it just makes it worse, Pastor Mike. You're saying to me that God is a willing, generous, kind person, and we're talking about unanswered prayer. Yeah, well, I want you to remember the intentions of God. If you are taking notes, that'll be the next thing to jot down, because I think that's the critical element in this passage. There is an intention of God. Remember the intentions of God. Verse 5. From the inside, he answers and he says, do not bother me. door has already been shut. My children and I are in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything. I tell you that though we will not get up and give him anything because he's his friend, but because of his persistence, his shameless impudence, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. The problem of unanswered prayer is not that God is not good or not willing or not gracious. There's something wrong somewhere else. There's something wrong in the request. There's something wrong in the timing. There's something wrong in the means. There's something wrong in the way in which this is in the mind of an infinitely wise God being received. So I want to think through why God would delay. And I'm going to give you 5 things, as long as we're making lists this morning. 5 things that I see throughout Scripture that would be good for you to think through when it comes to the good intentions of God. Jot this one down. Matthew chapter 16, verses 22 and 23. Here's a prayer. Peter takes Jesus aside and says, "Far be it from you, Lord." In other words, don't let God ever let this happen. This shall never happen to you. Well, what is he saying? Well, Jesus just say, I'm going to go be rejected. He just said, I'm going to go be beaten. I'm going to be crucified. And Peter says, no. I love you. I care for you. You're the rabbi that I'm following. You're the Messiah of the Old Testament. You're the fulfillment of all biblical prophecies. And Jesus turned to Peter and said, get behind me, Satan. It's a bad day when Jesus calls you Satan, right? I mean, that's you know your prayers are off that day. You're a hindrance to me. You're not setting your mind on the things of God, but the things of man. If I'm going to make a set of subpoints here, let me put it down this way. Letter A. When I think about the intentions of God, remembering the good intentions of God, I can know this about some of my requests. Sometimes I have a bad request. It is the problem of a bad request. And I think it's good, and it seems good. Wouldn't it seem good for Jesus not to be beaten? That would seem good. Wouldn't it be good for the people not to reject Christ? That would be good. Wouldn't it be good for people not to slam the door on my face when it comes to... That would all be good. And yet there's a bad request in that if I don't realize that sometimes the good purposes of God overarch some of my requests that on the surface seem immature and good in my own mind. They seem good in my mind. They seem mature, but they're immature. I don't want anybody sticking a needle in my arm when I'm 4 years old. I had that figured out by 4. And I recognized there was something about that was done by my parents out of love for me. The reality of God's good intentions have to be seen sometimes in light of my immaturity. And my immaturity sometimes provides God with some bad requests. And you're saying, that's not my thing. I know my request is good. Well, then it may be a problem of conflicting means. Letter B, if you're taking notes, the problem of a bad request. And there's a lot of things that we may think are good on the surface. Peter was not a bad guy. He had a good request, but it wasn't one that God was going to answer, and God saw a bigger good that he was going to accomplish. What about the problem of conflicting means? What do I mean by that? Here's a prayer of the Apostle Paul. Let me give you 2 passages that will help illustrate this. 2 Corinthians 5, 9, and 10. Particularly verse 9, when Paul says, we make it our aim to please him. Right? Whether we're here, away, wherever we are, home in the body or away, because we're all going to appear before the judgment seat of God, we want to please God. So here's his request in 2 Corinthians 5. I want to please God. Is that a good request? Yes, it's a good request. Well, what is the means to have God answer that prayer? Well, a few chapters later, in chapter 12, he tells us about his prayer life, and he says, here was my request. I have a physical ailment he called a thorn in the flesh, and as a matter of fact, I know it's bad. Speaking of Satan, it is a messenger of Satan, and I'm asking for God to take it away. And not just asking, pleading, and persisting in his pleading. I pleaded 3 times. Which does not seem like 33 times that you've prayed for whatever you've prayed for. But, I mean, that's an example of the consistency of Paul praying. Please take this away. Please take this away. Please take this away. You got an ailment? You got a problem? You got recurring migraines? You got some issue with arthritis? Whatever your issue is, you say, God, this seems bad. As a matter of fact, I could even say, this is a result of the fall. This is not good. God, you're for good. You're for whole bodies. You're for health. This seems bad. And so I'm going to pray. Now, what did he pray before in chapter 5? 2 Corinthians 5. I want to please you. In chapter 13, now he says, I don't want this illness. There's a problem of conflicting means. God wants to answer the prayer Because there's a good prayer, and his intention is to answer the best prayer of the Apostle Paul. And the best prayer of the Apostle Paul is, I do want you to please me, and so I'm going to answer that prayer, and now here's my means for that, a chronic illness. And now you get down on your knees and you pray, and you say, God, take this chronic illness away. God, please take this chronic illness away. God, please take this pain out of my body. Take this chronic illness away. And you're sitting there saying, I don't understand. The guy across the street doesn't have a chronic illness. And you start to become embittered. And I'm saying here, your prayer needs to adjust. Your prayer needs to be persistent, but it's a kind of adjustment because the prayer that you're frustrated over may be a prayer of the conflicting means of getting the big requests accomplished in your life. My kids may have conflicting requests. My boys, when they were growing up, they want to be strong. They want to be big. They want to play on the team and be big, but they don't want their muscles to be sore. And they don't want to go to practice, and they don't want to work out. Well, okay, there's a problem of conflicting means here. You think sitting in front of the TV, eating donuts from Tennessee or California is the answer to you being strong on your team. That's not going to work. I want to eat marshmallows, as many marshmallows as I want. But I'm praying I don't have a stomach ache. I want to buy a car. I just don't want it to cost me anything. I want to go to school. I don't want to write any papers. I want to be educated, but I don't want to have to go to school. I mean, there's a lot of things we pray for. And we've got to realize God's looking at these prayers, and he's answering these prayers. But he's answering these prayers, but the means are conflicting with these prayers, and you're frustrated about these prayers not being answered, and you've got to see there's conflicting means in accomplishing God's good in your life. Could have just a bad request. Peter had a bad request. Paul had a couple of different prayer requests, and there was some conflicting means. Letter C, there's a problem of inferior means. There's a way that God is going to get things done, and sometimes he chooses a superior means, and we're praying for the inferior means. Monica was a 4th century Christian, a devout Christian, North Africa. She had a very difficult, unsaved husband. She has 3 kids, and she wants them all to be saved. She wants them to be godly. She's looking at her ungodly husband, and she says, it's all about me here. If anyone's going to get these kids saved, it's going to be me. I don't want my kids running off and following the pattern of my husband. And so she prays, and she prays, and she prays. And her second-born and her third-born both become devoted followers of Christ. Her oldest wouldn't do it. It was getting to be the time when most of these kids leave their home and go out and do their thing, and this was a smart guy. Matter of fact, that was one of the problems she saw. He's too smart for his own good, and he's frustrated. I've got a wayward son, and it was breaking her heart, and she knew he was going to leave, and he wanted to go to Rome and study. And Monica prayed, please, God, do not let my son leave this house until he's a Christian. And she prayed, and she prayed, and she prayed. And she thought the means by which my son is going to get saved and serve Christ is because I am going to be the means by which this gets done. God, I know what's best here. Please. Well, she had a desire, just like Paul wanted to please God. And the means by which it was going to get done, she was praying for the means, and God said, that's an inferior means. I've got a better means. Your son is brilliant. And I'm going to send him off to Rome. And Rome in the 4th century was the Las Vegas, it's like your kid going, I'm going to get a condo on the Strip. Right? Your non-Christian son. I think you're going to go, oh, please don't go there. It's exactly how Monica felt. Monica's son, if you don't know, was Augustine. He goes to Rome. He comes in contact with Ambrose of Milan, the great preacher. Sits under him. It's a lengthy story you can read about in the Confessions. I was just rereading that this summer. And he gets saved. And he becomes one of the most brilliant thinkers Christianity's seen. And all because, in Monica's mind, her prayers weren't answered. Because she was praying, I want to lead my son to Christ. I want him to stay here in the safety of our godly home. It was a 1 Corinthians 7 situation. I know that at least while he's in my home, there's an influence, a sanctifying influence there. Please don't let my son leave and go off to college and have his life all messed up. Well, she prayed many prayers that were unanswered and shed a lot of tears. And in the end, she got all she wished for, but not all she prayed for. And that might be a good way for you to look at some of your prayer requests that seem to be frustrating you. the problem of inferior means. Some of your prayers may be bouncing up the ceiling because there's a problem of intent. Letter D, the problem of intent. You know this passage well, I trust. James chapter 4. James chapter 4, verse 2 says, there's a lot of things you want. It says you don't have those things that you want because you don't ask. Well, that sounds great. Let's just start asking. Verse 3, though, says you ask and don't receive because you ask wrongly. Not because you're not saying the sentence is right. It's because you want to spend them on your desires. If this man wanted to get more bread to stock it up in his cupboard, or burn his neighbor's bread, that would be a bad thing. It may not apply in this particular illustration, and you may not think it applies in your situation, but I would always try, as I even referenced last night, to try and separate, if you can, in your minds, the glory of God, the larger intent of God, the good that God wants to accomplish in and around the world through the glory of what he does in people's lives from whatever it might be that would please you if he answered that prayer. In other words, separate in your mind how much of this is really about me, how much is about my satisfaction, my peace, my comfort, my convenience in life. It's easy to look at your neighbor who's praying for the yacht and to recognize, well, that's pretty selfish prayer. Well, you're praying prayers that seem pretty godly on the surface, but may be just as selfish as his. Search your heart. Ask, as the psalmist did, for God to know you and try you, to see your heart, to see if there's any wicked way in you, any motive. God judges the motives of our hearts, and the Word of God is helpful in that regard. You do understand, even when it comes to your children, I'm thinking of Monica and her unsaved son, we love our children. We love our children more than we love the children at the church. We love our children more than we love the children at the public high school down the street. You do understand that they're all individuals that have worth and significance, that are valued because they're all made in the image of God. It's funny how ardently I pray for my children's health when I can walk by callously a lot of other people that have all kinds of problems. Say, well, I don't really know them. It's funny how I cry at the funeral of my good friends, but drive by the funeral home where they're all lined up for the next internment of someone in the cemetery, and I think, oh wow, I wish they would get out of the way here. Oh yeah, I guess someone died, and I don't give it a second thought. All I'm saying is we can't help but be selfish because there are things that impact ourselves. I want you to pray not just for the salvation of your kids. Pray for the salvation of those on the university campus down the street. I want you to pray for the people in the high school. I want you to pray for the people that are skateboarding down the street here, and you see them and you think, made in the image of God. I want to care about them. And you know this, God's going to be glorified even if every single person is not saved. You understand that He brings glory to Himself, as hard as it is for sinful creatures to realize, even in lost folks, in the judgment of the lost. I'm not trying to make you callous toward the ones you love the most, but you certainly need to look at your requests through the intent or the motives of your heart. How about the problem of timing? I guess that's the one you would expect me to go to first. Preachers talk about this all the time. What did I say? 5 things? Problem of a bad request, the problem of conflicting means, the problem of inferior means, the problem of intent, the problem of timing. Job chapter 6, Job prays in verse 8, "Oh, that I might have my request and that God would fulfill my hope." I'm praying and I want God to answer me. Question, did God answer him? It's not a trick question, Interactive Church. It's Saturday morning. Did God answer his prayer? Not until the end of the book, though. There was a lot of spiraling and spinning that took place between chapter 6 and the end of the book. You know the last chapter of Job, right? God restored all of his riches. No, I know his kids were still, he walked by the cemetery where his kids were buried. Not as though the pain was all completely gone, but God answered his prayer. The sickness of his body, when he's scraping the pus off his skin with broken pottery, he was restored to full health. His riches that were all stolen, all restored. Richer than he was before. More children, more feasting, more houses, more lands. Job was restored. Well, he asked in chapter 6, "Oh, that I might have my request, that God would fulfill my hope." Well, the problem of timing is a lot like the problem of conflicting means. It's a problem of perspective. Job sees how his life is going to glorify God. And the delay was part of God's process. The delay of God's relief, which did come, was for God's glory. The only reason we learn about the quote-unquote patience of Job, as it says in the New Testament, is because God's answer was delayed. Did he pray? He prayed. Do you pray when you're sick? Of course you pray. When you pray, do you pray over bad things? You pray intuitively for those things. And I'm saying don't stop. And Job, he's a great example in the beginning of the book. But he does a lot of bad things in the middle of the book. I mean, hats off to Job, right? I mean, I hope I get to meet him, get a chance to shake his hand one day. But he has to admit, there's a lot of spinning that went on that was not good in the book of Job. And I understand it. I'd be right there. I've been there with a lot less pain in my life. I've been to the same place he is, saying, oh, I just wish that I weren't even born. But this is all a matter of timing. All this to show that your prayer requests need to change sometimes. When to stop praying? I'm going to say never stop praying, but that doesn't mean that you don't stop praying for the things you're praying for, because you might be praying for something that's bad. It's just not good. It's not biblical. It may be that you're praying for the wrong means, maybe inferior, maybe conflicting, maybe there's an intent of your heart that's wrong. Maybe you're praying for timing and saying, God, you got to do this now, and you need to realize there's time to stop praying for that. Did God care about Israel when they went off to the Babylonian captivity? Yes, he did. Should I be praying the way Jeremiah was praying? God said no. Here's a passage for you. You'll never find it on any Dayspring cards at the Christian bookstore, but here it comes. Jeremiah 7:16. Do not pray for this people. Do not lift up a cry or prayer for them. Do not intercede for them. I will not hear you. Can you see that on a pillow at the Christian bookstore? Stop praying. At least the prayers you're praying. You want to pray that God would be glorified in Israel? Great. They're going to the doghouse for 70 years. They're going to come back. There would be a Zerubbabel. There would be a Nehemiah. There would be an Ezra. There would be people glorifying God again in Israel, in the land. But right now, stop praying, Jeremiah, for the prayers you're praying. He's called the weeping prophet. And there's a lot to weep over at the funeral of Israel. But they would be resurrected. But the things you're praying for, right now, you've got inferior means in mind. You've got perspective and timing that's off. You're praying really a bad request right now, Jeremiah, and would you stop praying for that? Is there a time to stop praying? If that's a big question, the answer is no. Never stop praying. Is there a time to stop praying for that? I'm saying there may be a time to stop praying for that. Paul interceded 3 times. And I'm saying if he were like us, who didn't recognize inferior meanings, bad timing, conflicting means, selfish motives, he would have prayed 130 times. Instead, he got the message. Got to adjust your prayer life sometimes. This all ends this story about shameless persistence, impudence, by the statements you know so well in verses 9 and 10, repeated often, I'm sure, by Christ, recorded a couple times for us. So I say to you. All I'm trying to say to you in this illustration, if a bad man's going to get out of bed and give bread to his neighbor, if someone just keeps at it, I want to tell you to keep at it, and I'm not a bothered, irritable neighbor. I'm a God who wants to respond for good, and I'm smarter than you, way smarter than your parents were, than you were at 5. In other words, at 5, my parents were a lot smarter than me, and God is infinitely smarter by degree. And all I'm saying is this, that God ends and says, but just keep on praying. Your request may need to shift. There's a time to say this is a bad request, an inferior request, a poorly timed request, but keep on praying. Ask and keep asking. It'll be given to you. Verse 9. Seek and keep seeking. You're going to find. Knock and keep knocking. It will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. He who knocks, it's going to be open to you. So I would say this. Yesterday I invited you, I exhorted you to resolve to pray, devote yourself to prayer. Let me say this today, because this conference is going to be over. Unless the Lord comes back, it won't be the last conference you go to. If he doesn't come back soon, you're going to go to another conference. You're going to hear more sermons. You're going to get on to other things. But I would say this, number 3, you need to resolve to pray persistently, continually, to never give up in prayer, even though your prayer request may shift. Your prayer requests may evolve, to use that word, in the proper context. And I want you to look at these three things that I think, and I don't want to read too much into the text, that are at least distinguished by the words ask, seek, and knock. Asking certainly puts me in a humble perspective. It is put it this way, letter A humble persistence. Asking means you can do it, I can't, I'm an inferior, you're a superior. I'm showing my deference, I'm showing my dependence, I'm showing the fact that you are the one in charge. And that always should be a arrangement that provides in my own thinking flexibility. If I'm asking a superior for something at work, I'm going to ask, hey, would you do this, boss? And they may say, there's a different way to go about it than the way that you're thinking, but yeah, I'll respond, I'll answer. So the deference, the humble persistence. I want you to be persistent, but I'd like you to be humble, flexibly persistent. Right? Jesus said in the garden, not my will, but yours be done. Ken said that well this morning. That reminder of the will of God. It's not about our will in heaven. It's about heaven's will on our life. So I'm always praying persistently, but with a humble persistence. Seeking. That's a great word, but it seems to be a word that reminds me of labor, of being active. Jot that down if you would. Active persistence. Seeking is the idea of going out. I picture someone with a flashlight back in the day with a lamp or a torch, and I'm looking under things like the woman who's got that lost coin. Remember that in Luke 15? Looking. It's active. You ask and you look. You seek. Seeking shows that we're involved. And Ken said this well this morning. The idea of us being involved. There's something, God is always moving us and changing us and prompting us through our praying. Here's a genius. Of course, everything Christ did was genius. But this is an ingenious way to invite someone to pray about something they should be involved in. Matthew chapter 9, last couple of verses, when he's talking about the harvest. I remember in John 4, he talks about the harvest, and he says, lift up your eyes to the field. They're white to harvest, right? Like, get out there. The people of Sychar were coming across the valley. He was talking to the woman at the well there in Samaria. But look at the way he does it in Matthew 9, or recall it. In verse 37, he says to his disciples, same idea, the harvest is plentiful. A lot of non-Christians out there. But the laborers are few. Therefore, you know the verse? Pray that you'll get out into the harvest field. No. Pray that you'll kind of get off your duff and get there and work. No. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he'll send forth, thrust forth, push out into the harvest field more laborers. I love that. I remember starting a series on evangelism in our church. This was years ago. But all I did at the end of the sermon was say, would you just go home and pray, commit to pray every single day that there would be more people sharing their faith. I wanted to take this passage and be very specific and rigid about what it says. I just want to be praying that there would be more people sharing their faith. There's no way you can pray those kinds of prayers without it affecting you. Right? Get off your rear end and get out there and do it. And that's the way it's going to be. I mean, I going through my prayer list this morning, praying for things, and I realized, and I was thinking about exactly what Ken was preaching on this morning. There's that idea of it's always changing me. It's always adjusting me. It gets me up and moving in a direction. And that's what it does. It's an active persistence. I'm praying for the same things every day unless God is adjusting those or moving those or showing the inferior intent and getting me to pray for bigger and better things. But the idea is there's always an activity that results from that. I think that certainly is inferred by that idea. It's connoted by the concept of seeking. And then the last one there, knocking. Knocking. Tenacious persistence. That's how I wrote it down, because I think about how tenacious you have to be to keep on knocking. You know what happens if I've ever been to a place, remember a guy, there's a couple stories that come to mind, where I knock. And you know what that turns to real quick? Pound. You know why? Because my knuckles hurt. I'm tired of doing this. This feels not as bad as this feels. I can only do this for so long, and I'm like, so then I'll do that. But that's the idea. This is going to be hard. There's a tenacity to it. You got to have some calluses on your knees when you're praying. There's got to be a sense in which you are tenaciously persistent, like someone knocking on a door. Talk about shameless impudence. Well, that's shameless. Like I said, if your door is visible to the street and you stand out in front of your neighbor's house and knock for 2 hours, you're going to get some attention, unless they live in a desolate place. People go, what is with that guy? Just won't stop. How embarrassing. I was preaching from Colossians 4 last night. And we looked at verse 2, but 10 verses later, talking about prayer, and devotion to prayer, he puts Epaphras up on a pedestal, and he says, Epaphras, who was from Colossae, he's one of you, he says, servant of Christ, he greets you, always struggling on your behalf in his prayers. Always struggling on your behalf. And you probably had this pointed out because there's a great English parallel to this. The Greek word is agonizomai. Agonizomai. I get the word agony from that. This is hard work. I mean, prayer is not what it looks like on the Dayspring cards. And I'm not knocking Dayspring. I say that so much on the radio. Someone from Dayspring, an executive, wrote me a really nasty letter and said, would you stop talking so disparagingly about Dayspring cards? It should be a compliment. The only card company I can think of. So I wrote him that, and I don't think he took that well. But I am saying the idea of prayer, as it's pitched to us, certainly in the tchotchke section of the Christian bookstore, I'm just saying it looks so pleasant. It looks so genteel. It looks so, wafting on a cloud. I mean, it's hard work. He's always struggling on your behalf in his prayers. Or look at this one, Galatians 4:19, or think of it. Paul says, my little children, for whom I'm again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. You want to talk about a prayer life that hurts? Now, I passed the kidney stone, but I've never had a child. I've watched 3 of them be born. It doesn't look pleasant. It looks painful. And Paul is basically expressing his concern. Talk about pleasing God. I want you to please the Lord. I want you to avoid the heresy. I want you to do the right things. I want you to grow in Christ. I want you to be complete in him. All the kinds of things he's prayed for the Colossians, he cares about for the Galatians. And he says, it's like I'm giving birth. I want this so bad in your life. That's a tenacious persistence. Resolve to pray persistently. Asking is a humble reflection. Seeking is an active perspective. Knocking is a tenacious perspective. And all of it is about persistence. I say to you, ask and it'll be given. Seek, you'll find. Knock, the door will be open. Everyone who asks, really asks, continues to ask, he receives. The one who seeks finds. To him who knocks, it will be open to you. It may not be in the form that you think. More on this tomorrow morning. But I need you to resolve not only to pray, but to keep on praying. I had a guy over to my house that knew plants. I guess he does this for a living. I didn't realize that, but we were eating in my backyard. The weather was right for that, and I was talking about other things when he said this, but he looked at a little sapling. I don't have a green thumb. None of my fingers are green, but certainly not my thumb. And there's a little patch of dirt, and there was this little sapling that was kind of growing out on its own, this little patch of dirt. And he talked about that, what it was. He said that is a such and such a whatever, and it's going to grow, and it's going to be big, and it's going to be... Well, what's funny about that is it sat there, growing, poking up out of the piece of dirt in the corner of my backyard, which I'm from California, so my yard is really small. It's about the size of your closet. But anyway, he pointed to that, and I thought about how much trouble... Because the day before, I'd been talking to some friends about these trees that are on the city. The city has a little strip of land right behind my fence that grows these trees that are so gigantic that the roots have come, a long, long way under my fence, into my backyard, and it's tearing up my hardscape. Thanks, city. And I've had the city out. Whatever, don't get me started with that. Why did you bring that up? But this guy leaves after dinner. Guess what I did? I went over there and took that little sapling and yanked it out of the ground. I said, I'm not going to let that thing mess up my yard. I'll put an AstroTurf. I don't want the problems of that. And as I thought about that, at one time somebody planted saplings along the side of the backyard of my house, and they grew into these huge things. Why? Imperceptibly, every day they're just seeking nutrients, they're seeking water, and those roots go out and they keep on going day by day, inch by inch, the persistence of those roots just reaching out for that water and those nutrients. Of course, prayer is about our relationship with God. I realize that. But it is filled with requests that God would have you be persistent, tenacious, impudent, shameless, continuing to endure and persevere in your prayers. And you make a lifetime of that, someone's going to look at your life down the road, and it's not going to be in the first year or 5 years or 10 years of your Christian life, but they're going to see amazing fruit because of your persistence in prayer. Like under the surface, it's going to move, it's going to seek, it's going to push, it's going to take hold of the good things that God has planned for his people. You may come through it with a lot of scars, like Peter, like Paul and his thorn in the flesh, like Job and the funerals in his past. But you will glorify God, but you've got to be a man or a woman of prayer. When to stop praying, we'll never stop praying. God wants you to persist. Let's talk to God right now. God, we'd like to be prayers that don't give up when we don't get the things we ask for. But we do want to be wise, as we'll talk about tomorrow. We want to be careful to know how to tailor our prayer requests. We know we can be like Peter and say, well, this seems right, and yet we don't know the Word of God well enough. If Peter had searched the Scriptures, and I don't want to knock him. I don't know how well he knew his Old Testament, but had he spent more time on Isaiah 53, maybe he would have realized that this suffering servant needed to go to the cross and suffer and take upon himself the sin and guilt and shame of Peter, and he would not have prayed so reflexively. That's never going to happen to you. God, we pray for the thorns to go away. And there's nothing really wrong with, at least initially, praying for things that just seem so obvious to pray for. I've got a headache. I want to pray for it to go away. My kids are sick. I want them to be well. But let us be more thoughtful as Christians. That because the thing I ask for didn't happen, that I don't just walk away and say, well, I'm done praying. I give up on that. Let our prayer life increase, even as some of the prayers that we're praying for don't get answered. Let us look for the big, big, big things that you're doing, the overarching things, knowing we're just pawns in this big chess game, really. We are. It's not about us. We're not the center of the universe. We're not the center of your plan in terms of the church and our church history. We're just one small piece, and you can use us however you'd like. We just want to always pray and never give up. We always want to pray and never lose heart. So God, adjust our prayer lists accordingly, and let us be people that never give up on the act and the discipline and the duty and the delight of talking to you and bringing our request, asking, seeking, and knocking. Make that a reality for us in Jesus' name.